so that you can all see the grossly disgusting person that's talking to you. But I don't know if the webcam is on right now. Let me see. I'm not going to spend too much time at this. I will use the webcam a little bit later, but it is not coming. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, my name is Bob Nelms. I'm the president of Failsafe Network. Before I get started, I'd like to tell you, and you're already noticing it, I'm sure, that there's a lag, there's a delay. I live in the mountains. For those of you who live in this area, I live near Crabtree Falls in Montebello, and the only internet we have up here is satellite. So there's about a 3-second delay in things, and I hope I'll compensate by advancing the slides before you actually see them. But I'm going to turn the webcam off right now, and I'll come on a little bit later when I'd like to show you some stuff. And I'd like to just get started right now with the topic. First of all, it is an honor to have been asked to do this, and I really thank you, Norval, and I thank everybody for spending their lunchtime with me right now. In 1974, I was hired by an internationally recognized guru in this area, actually, in Hopewell, Virginia, in the chemical industry, whose name was Charles Latino. Some of you might actually know of him. He passed away several years ago, but he was called the father of reliability in the chemical process industries. And he was one of the originators of the phrase root cause analysis, at least in the chemical industry. What I'd like to point out right now is that if you Googled root cause analysis in 1974, of course you wouldn't have been able to, there was no internet. But if there was an internet and if there was a Google and you would have Googled that phrase, you would have gotten 0 hits. It did not exist in 1974. Fast forward to today in 2016 and Google root cause analysis. And as most of you know, what you're going to get is pages and pages and pages of different people doing root cause analysis and different consultants and training outfits providing different kinds of root cause analysis. And what's fascinating to me is that they're all doing something different. They're all providing something different. Again, in 1974, nobody's doing this. Today in 2016, everybody is doing this. Most of the hits we get from our website are from Asia, India, Africa. That's not Asia, of course. But everybody in the world is doing root cause analysis, and yet everyone is doing something different. So the problem with root cause analysis, as I see it, looking back since 1974, is that everybody, or at least a lot of people, think they're addressing root cause, but they're not. And that's extremely dangerous. I deal mainly in the hazardous industries that we have in the United States and Canada. And when we think we're addressing root cause and we're not addressing root cause, we get side-blinded. Something hits us and we don't know where it came from. And that's happening more and more often these days, where the results are increasingly catastrophic. So there is a big problem with root cause analysis these days. And from my perspective, the main problem is that it addresses everything but root cause. Now, I'm going to introduce myself a little bit better now. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey, because when you hear about my journey, you're going to understand where I'm coming from. I graduated from Texas A&M as an aerospace engineer in 1969. That's the Vietnam era. I was hired by McDonnell Douglas in St. Louis, Missouri, as an aeronautical loads engineer on the F-4 Phantom jet, which is what we were flying in Vietnam at the time. But it was called the Flying Brick. I mean, it wasn't a very good performing aircraft. The average life expectancy of an F-4 pilot back then in Vietnam was measured in months. It was awful. So we were trying to make the aircraft more maneuverable. In 1979, I got out of aerospace for all kinds of reasons I won't get into, and I was hired by that internationally recognized guru, Charles Latino. I was hired by Allied Chemical Corporation as a reliability engineer in a nylon plant. And I worked there until 1979, mainly on equipment problems. Because after all, I'm an engineer, and I love things, you know, the mechanics of things, if you will. That plant that I was hired into, I'm going to talk about a little bit more later. It was the worst performing plant in all of Allied Chemical. And we turned that plant around to being the best performing plant in all of Allied Chemical. So Allied said, we want to do that. Whatever you did in this plant, we want to do it everywhere. So they formed a reliability center in Hopewell, Virginia. And I was pulled into the reliability center. And I went all over the United States and Canada doing what we did in that one plant. My specialty became failure analysis during that period of time. I became fascinated with the mechanics of failure. And I became their root cause analysis lead along the way. In 1985, I formed Failsafe. I formed my own company because I became very passionate about why things went wrong. So again, I formed my own company. And then one of the two most formative times of my life occurred. My first client when I formed Failsafe was Morton Thiokol that operated out of Utah. Morton Thiokol was the manufacturer of the solid rocket boosters that exploded when the Challenger blew up in 1986. I was there when the Challenger blew up. I was working out there as a root cause analysis consultant. And my life took a startling different track then, because for the first time I started realizing it's not the mechanics of things that really cause our problems. It's us. In the 1990s, after I got more experience, I wrote two books about my experiences. I've written numerous articles, given many presentations around the world. You're looking at pictures of people from Indonesia, and I guess that's Wyoming up there. I started developing affiliations in 2011 because I was too busy to handle all the work myself. My youngest daughter, Jessica, graduated from Virginia Tech in 2014, and she became very interested in what I did for a living. Out of my 5 kids, she's the only one who really took an interest in what I was doing. So I hired her, and then in 2015, last year, I started developing more affiliates. Sharon is on the left. She's out of California. Mickey is from New Mexico. Jessica lives in Charlottesville. Yuji is from Japan. And Medea is from Iran, believe it or not. So we are the ones who are pushing what we're doing right now. But the second most formative thing that happened in my life happened on May the 30th, 1996 at 11:38 a.m. I'll never forget that day. This happened, by the way, in Richmond, Virginia, which is where I was living at the time. And what happened was that my wife decided to run an errand in that van. She got 1 block from home. Suddenly, the van caught fire right in the middle of the street, created much distress, anxiety, and dismay The 3 fire engines were dispatched. I wasn't there when it happened, by the way. I was eating lunch, business lunch at the Olive Garden. But the fire department told us that we were lucky no one was seriously injured. And my response to this whole thing back then was, perfect. Yes, something happened in my life. I can use this as an example. I'll collect all the evidence just like I suggest. Oh, this is going to be great. However, 20 years and over 350 classes later, because I've used this example in all the classes that I teach, and I have been using it for 20 years, I'm telling you right now, you don't know me, of course, but I am not the same man that I was in 1996. And the reason I'm not the same man is because of one central question that I have learned to ask. And that question is, what is it about the way I am that contributes to the problems around me, and what am I going to do about it? Now, this is a root cause analysis talk, and I'm telling you that this is the central question that we should all be asking. What is it about the way I am, notice the tense, present tense, what is it about the way I am that contributes to the problems around me, and what am I going to do about it? That question, since 1996, has changed my life and everybody's life that I've come in contact with who's willing to listen. Now, having said that, I'd like you to ask yourselves, hopefully you are in the position to answer this. What are your root cause analysis efforts focused on? Are they focused on developing action items? I hope not. Are they focused on modifying or developing procedures and checklists? Oh my goodness, I hope not. Are they focused on merely upgrading equipment? How about this? Are they focused on improving processes or systems? I mean, you're quality folks. Probably that's what you want to focus on. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you think the root causes of your problems are there, you don't understand yet. Are you focused on finding who to blame? Or what about this? Are your root cause analysis efforts focused on writing a final report to impress other people? You know, I put a survey out. I guess it was, I do webinars a lot, and I put a questionnaire out on a webinar, and I asked the attendees to check which one of these they were focused on, and all of them get equal amount of votes. All of this stuff is what most root cause analysis efforts focus on. And I'm suggesting, I don't want to come across arrogant here because I don't know all the answers, but if that's all your efforts are focused on, you are heading to doom. So please, as I get into more detail here, please consider the following truism. Wherever you might work, wherever you are right now, look around. I mean, I'm in a home office right now, and I'm looking around, and I can see my windows and my desk and my light. Let's look around right now. And I'm going to say that when something goes wrong within a system that people created, when something goes wrong wherever you are right now, when something goes wrong within a system that people created, we will be able to trace its causes back to people. That is true 100% of the time. After all, if we've conceived of it and designed it and constructed it and maintained it and operate it, etc., if something goes wrong with it, we'll be able to trace its causes back to us. I mean, after all, it's our baby if we've conceived of it. Any acknowledgement of a cause that doesn't go back to this is false. We are the cause of everything good, and we're the cause of everything that's not so good. Therefore, when something goes wrong in a system that we have created, the goal, the ultimate goal, ought to be to change people, not systems or equipment or processes. I mean, those things will eventually change, but the ultimate goal ought to be to change people, because when people change, all that other stuff will automatically change. So the problem with root cause analysis is that it addresses, in my opinion, everything but root cause, which is us. Now, please, you don't know me and you don't know where I'm going with this. This has nothing to do with the blame game, and you're going to hear that in a few minutes. So I'm going to suggest the essence of a root cause analysis process that addresses us. And I'm going to address it by going back to my journey. When you understand where I've been, you'll understand why I'm saying what I'm saying. And when I look at the picture on the screen, I can't help but acknowledge that we are all on a different path. And it's just amazing to me that all of our paths seem to be a little different. My path is no better than your path, that's for sure. But again, I want to share a little bit about my journey. And I want to, this slide is up there because this is that allied chemical nylon plant in Chesterfield County, Virginia, an aerial view of it. And I put that there to remind me of what happened the first day that I showed up to work at that plant. I was this cocky 24-year-old aerospace engineer with a white shirt and tie that showed up to work. And within the first week of work, the older guys came up to me and told me, you know, Bob, you probably have a pretty good future in front of you, but you've got to get out of maintenance. Because I was hired into the maintenance department. And they said, you got to get out of maintenance. You got to get into operations and production. That's where the future is. That's where the promise is. That's where the hope is. And I'm telling you, that first week of work, that statement stuck into my craw. I knew there was something wrong about that statement. Maintenance wasn't where I should be. I should be in operations, because maintenance deals with failure. And nobody likes talking about failure. Well, you know, I knew, and all of us knew in that maintenance department, that what you're seeing on the screen right now is true. Everything we need to know about improving our lives is contained within our failures. Everything. No one anywhere learned anything without themselves or someone else having failed first. Failure is not what we think it is. Now, we all knew that. There was, I don't know, 10 of us back then in that chemical plant. And taking that attitude, we started looking at things that went wrong in that chemical plant, knowing that it was golden. Things that went wrong are golden. So we started looking at things like, oh, I don't know, like that pump. That picture is a positive displacement pump. And I'm just going to use this as an example right now. This positive displacement pump stopped working. It failed. And we started looking at the physics of it first, of course. Why did it stop working? Or how did it stop working? And for example, it stopped working because it stopped turning. It couldn't turn anymore. Well, why couldn't it turn anymore? Because it seized. Well, why did it seize? Because the internal components grew and came in contact with the casing. Well, why did the internal components grow? Because the lubrication was wrong. It was the wrong lubrication in there, and it got too hot. And because of that, the internal pieces grew and the pump seized. And when we got to that point, you know, we'd make sure the right lubrication was in there, of course, and we felt like, you know, clapping and patting ourselves in the back. And everything that went wrong in that chemical plant, we attempted to understand the physics, just like this example. And we did. You know, but you know what happened? The failure rate in that plant kept going up in spite of our attempts to understand just the physics. Obviously, understanding just the physics were not enough. So back then, this is in the 1970s now. Back then, we said we're going to dig deeper. And we started digging deeper, and we found that everything, every physical problem that we found, we could trace its causes back to people. I already mentioned this before. Everything that goes wrong in a system created by humans can be traceable back to humans. Everything. I mean, this was a eureka back then. Now it's common knowledge, but back then, whoa. For example, you know, this pump failed because the wrong lubricant was in it. Why was the wrong lubricant in it? Because somebody put the wrong lubricant in it. It didn't just float in there somehow. Now, we knew intuitively that we couldn't stop there, because if we stop there, that's going to be perceived as the blame game. And we know, I don't know, everybody knows that the blame game is bad. I mean, heck, they've known that. You know, I'm not going to get religious on you here, but even the Bible in Genesis talks about blame. I mean, from the beginning of human history, we've all known that blame is not good. So we didn't want to go there. So we said we need to dig deeper. Why did the human do what the human did? And boy, this is really fascinating. I'm going to come on here and I'm going to show my video camera, because I'm going to ask you something right now. I'm going to ask you this. Why does anybody do anything? Now, you can't answer, and I don't expect you to answer, but watch me right now. What's causing my finger to go around like that? Why does my fist go back and forth? What's causing me to talk right now? What's causing my hands to do this? Why does anybody do anything? And the answer is because of what's on the screen, the thoughts that go through their mind at a particular point in time. Nothing we do, nothing, there's nothing that we do that's not caused by our thoughts. If we don't do something, that's also caused by our thoughts. I mean, this was a major eureka. I mean, our thoughts caused, human thought caused my room to be here. It caused this glass with water to be here. Human thoughts cause everything. So why did the human being put the wrong lubricant in that pump? Let me turn my camera off. All right, well, here's what happened. An oiler got to the scene of the pump, and he knew he had to change the oil of the pump, so he drained the pump, he drained the oil, and then he looked at his spec sheet, and the spec sheet said, you need to put 5W30 in there. He looked at his cart, and he didn't have 5W30 on his cart. All he had was 10W30. Uh-oh, I was supposed to put 5W30, but all I have is 10W30. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Shift change is 4. It'd take me 15 minutes to get back to the shop, 15 minutes to get the new stuff, 15 minutes to get back again. By that time, I'd be into overtime by the time I finished the repair. We're not allowed to have overtime. So you know what? I'm just going to put the 10W30 in there, because after all, I have a Honda, and the Honda my car calls for 5W30, and sometimes I put 10W30 in it. Nothing ever goes wrong. So I'm going to put 10W30 in there. Those thoughts caused that pump to seize. Now the next fascinating part of the journey is this. Now we're going to ask, and we're going to get the right people together to ask this. We're going to get the oiler, and we're going to get some of his peers, and maybe some foremen or some supervisors. We're going to get them all to sit down, and we're going to all discuss what thoughts should have gone through his mind at that point in time. And I'm telling you, they're going to struggle. Once they knew his actual thoughts, and they put themselves in his shoes, and then they go to the desired thoughts, what thoughts should have gone through his mind? There's no 10W30 in my cart. I'm supposed to put 5W30 in there. I'll be into overtime by the time I get the right stuff. What should he have thought? And, you know, I can't answer that. The organization has to answer that. Maybe they would say something like, well, I'm going to get Joe, who's on shift next, and I'm going to tell Joe that pump is still down. So you'd better get 10W30 on your cart and refill that pump first. And then he's thinking, the guy who did it thinks, I guess I should have had it on my cart before I got out there myself. Actual thoughts, desired thoughts. Actual thoughts, desired thoughts. You can even do this at home. Do it with your spouse. When they do something that you don't think they should have done, what was your spouse actually thinking? What should they have been thinking? What about your child, especially teenagers? Do it anywhere. See where it takes you. Where it's going to take you is a realization that there's a gap. There's a gap. We have a person in our organization who actually thinks one way when they should have been thinking another way. Now we're going to go to the important questions. We're going to ask, what is it about the way we are, present tense, that accounts for the gap? What is it about the way we are? Now, it depends on the incident. We can be a small team. We can be a whole plant. It just depends on what the incident is. What is it about the way we are that accounts for the gap in these thoughts? And more importantly, what is it about the way I am that is part of that we? Because, you know, actually there is no such thing as we, right? I mean, the only thing there is an accumulation of I's. These two questions with the clients that I work with are transformational. What is it about the way we are? What is it about the way I am that contribute to the problems around us? And what am I going to do about it? Now we're nearing the end. I mean, I got 5 or 10 more minutes, and then we're going to open it up for questions. But I have to acknowledge there are two major obstacles that presented themselves to us as we first got into this. And the first major obstacle was this. Few people accepted our conclusions. When we would go into an area and we would do this investigation, and we would point out to them the way they are, well, just imagine how that might have gone over. It was perceived as finger pointing. You know, you don't communicate right with one another. You don't train your people adequately. You take too many shortcuts. That kind of stuff is perceived as finger pointing, and to tell you the truth, it is finger pointing. So no wonder it didn't go over very well. The second of the major obstacles is related to the first, and that is fear of being blamed. I mean, people are going to be asked to answer, what is it about the way I am contributed to this incident? Well, answering that could cause people to want to nail them. Now, I have no idea how this slide is coming across on the webinar. It's supposed to be curtains separating. But breakthrough ideas came along around 5 to 7 years ago, which shattered the way we do root cause analysis. The old way of doing root cause analysis, as I said before, is where we would come in the champions would come in from the outside, and we would say something like this: after seeing all the evidence, we think the following are the causes of this event, and we'd lay out the causes. And then this is what we think you should do about it. That was the old way. That might be the way you're doing it. If that's the way you're doing it, oh, please, there's a much better way. The old way is when the investigative team comes in there and solves everything for you. And though it didn't come across, people were not very accepting of the answers. The new way is transformational. Now, the involved people, I'll say it again, the involved people, the oiler in my past example, the supervision of the oiler in my past example, look at the evidence themselves. And then they define their own causes and action items. They say things like, after seeing all the evidence, we think the following are the causes of this event. And they outline the causes, and this is what we're going to do about it. There's instantaneous buy-in this new way. But the thing that really makes this work, the thing I'd really like you to consider at the very end of this talk is this. When something goes wrong, I don't care what business you're in, this doesn't matter. When something goes wrong, no blame. Please, no blame. Now, the reason that we have procedures and checklists, and policies, and all that kind of stuff is to prevent an incident. If we have an incident, all that stuff, blame is too late. The time to blame or punish or discipline people is before something goes wrong, not after it. If your daughter comes home, you have a teenage daughter, and she comes home with alcohol in her breath, I don't know about spanking, but right then, that's when you should apply the discipline. Whatever your discipline is to be. Ground her, take her driver's license away right then. You don't wait for her to get into an accident and kill somebody or herself and then try to blame them. Again, after something goes wrong, no blame. No blame. If I was the CEO of General Motors, I probably shouldn't say this because I've never been a CEO of General Motors, but I'm telling you, I think what my policy would be is this: no blame. If anything goes wrong in General Motors, there's to be no blame. The only time any of you would have any reason to be concerned about your job is if you are blaming. No blame. However, you have to hear this part. However, and here's the however, required introspection. If you were involved in an incident or an out-of-quality product or an out-of-spec product, or anything goes wrong in your business and you were involved in it, you're not allowed to blame anybody else, but you are absolutely required to look at yourself instead. No blame, required introspection. No blame, required introspection. This works in families, it works in civic organizations, it works in industrial plants, it works everywhere. Can you imagine what would happen in our country with this? With all the problems we have right now? What about in the world? Stop blaming each other when something goes wrong. Look at the evidence and then look at yourself, all the parties involved. Now, 2 quotes, and then we're going to end it and we'll open it up to questions. These quotes come from people who have been through our 4-day classes. This approach to root cause analysis requires people to see themselves as part of the problem and not allow anyone to blame any other person or thing. It seems to me that this is the ultimate in personal accountability. Because, oh yeah, we have an accountability problem right now in our country. And you know why? Because everybody's blaming the other person. Everybody's trying to hold the other person accountable. Wouldn't it be nice for us all to hold ourselves accountable? Another quote, as far as I know, this is the only cause analysis method that addresses personal accountability, and it does it head on. So in conclusion, I think the most significant class quote I have ever heard is this one. This came from a guy that worked on the North Slope of Alaska. He said, if you think writing action items will solve your problems, you don't understand the causes of your problems. You know why he said that? Because he understands that it's people that cause problems, and you cannot write an action item to change people. Impossible. The only thing that's going to change people is introspection. You're not allowed to blame somebody else. You have to look at yourself when something goes wrong. So now I hope you understand what I said. The problem with root cause analysis, it addresses everything but root cause. We're the root cause. We need to look at ourselves. Thank you very much, Norval. I finished 15 minutes ahead of time.
Great, thank you, Bob. If anybody has any questions for Bob, please go ahead and type them into the chat box. We can wait a few minutes here as you do that. Just want to remind everybody that we did record this webinar, and it will be posted to our section's YouTube channel here in the next couple of days, so that if you want to go back and view it, or if you want to tell your friends and colleagues to go back and take a look at it, it'll be there available for them to look at it at their convenience.
Please, someone ask some kind of question, or somebody say something. It would help us all, I think. Thank you, Alan. Oh, Donna, I'm glad you said that. I'm having a hard time seeing the chat window, so...
Do you need me to read what's in the chat window, Bob?
If there's... I should be able to read it myself, and I can't remember how to do that.
Okay,
I can't see.
Well, I can tell you what's there.
Reread Donna's, please.
Okay, Donna's question or comment is, she appreciates the perspective. It seems difficult to me to not identify this as the blame game.
Okay, I need to address this. If you look up the definition of blame in the dictionary, heck, you don't even have to do that. Blame is when someone points at you and tells you your faults. That's blame. Introspection is totally different. Totally. If you want to call it self-blame, that's okay, but that's a very negative way of looking at it. If I see my problem for myself, I am going to do something about it. Instant, automatic, I'm going to do something. If somebody tells me what my problem is, the barrier is probably going to go up, and I'm going to resist it, and I'm going to cross my arms, and I'm going to point my finger elsewhere. Think about that, please. Blame is when you're pointing a finger at someone, Introspection is when they're seeing it for themselves. It's totally different. I saw another question pop in, Norval.
Yeah, Emily Sargent is asking, how do you inspire introspection?
That's a good question. There's actually an easy answer. Some of you probably know what it is. Lead by example. I'll use myself and my wife, okay? In the old days, when something went wrong between my wife and myself, you know, what the heck did you do? I mean, well, you don't think right. What's the matter with you? I never would have done that. That was my attitude. That's an arrogant male attitude, I suppose. These days, something goes wrong in my household, I try to look at my own role in it. And when I do that, guess what my wife does? She tends to do it too. And my children. Oh, it's not all you, Dad. I did this. I did that. How do you inspire introspection? Do it yourself first. One more thing along those lines. This is an action-reaction world, right? If you press on something with 5 pounds, it presses back with 5 pounds. If I blame you, you're going to blame back. If I would rather have introspection, I lead with introspection, you're going to get introspection back. Not all the time, but it starts the process. I saw some other questions, Norval.
Yeah, Emily has a follow-up question. How do you inspire introspection in others?
Well, that's the one I think I just tried to answer. Lead by example.
Okay, lead by example. Okay. Another question that came up is, industry requires a CAPA approach to problem solving. Having a person or training as the root cause is unacceptable and requires a system or mechanical solution. How do you change the required approach in an industry?
You know, I work in refineries, chemical plants, high hazard industries where all this, I work in power generation, where all of this CAPA stuff is there. And I'm not saying you don't need corrective actions. What I'm saying is that shouldn't be the ultimate goal of doing an LCA. The ultimate goal of doing an RCA is to change people. And when you change people, they themselves are going to come up with their own action items, if you will. But they'll want to do them because they know why they made them. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying get rid of CAPA. I'm saying make sure we have the right target. The ultimate goal should be to change people. When people change, all that other stuff changes, including systems, of course. I wish I had time to tell you stories about systems, though. You can have the best systems in the world, and all hell's going to break loose if you're not addressing the people issue. I'm only addressing these briefly, and I'm sorry about that. But what's another question, Norval?
Someone else asks, should we ask why more? In other words, why was there a policy of no overtime? And the statement, let's see, there was a statement made, there should be a culture of doing it right the first time.
Yeah, but see, this is part of my point. If I go in there as an outside investigator and tell them, you don't have a policy, you don't have an attitude here to do things right the first time. Wouldn't it be a whole lot better if they came up with that themselves? And they do. If that's what they think the cause is, that's what they're going to come up with. And they do that kind of thing all the time. Around here, our culture is not that we need to do things right the first time. They come up with that, and then they address it. They address how we're going to do that. The first part of that question was a good part also. If we don't have a policy of overtime, why don't we have a policy of overtime? We're not going to go there. I mean, you could go on and on and on back to Adam and Eve if you pursued this thing far enough. We want the right people to say to themselves, we don't have an overtime policy that's working for us. That's what we want them to say. And then they're going to take it to the next step and do something about it. They're not going to say why. Why don't we have an overtime policy that doesn't work for us? Why go there? Identify the issue and then do something about it. That might not satisfy you in a 2-minute answer. That's the best I can do. Do you have another question, Norval?
Yep. Let's see. I see your perspective. However, if the process had been followed as written, the issue would not have occurred. I think that might be more of a statement than a question.
That is not true. That's absolutely not true. I mean, I have so many examples in my head where the policy could be, if there are policies, and you know this, whoever said that, you know this, there are policies out there that are impossible for everyone to follow all the time, or you'd never get anything done. You'd have to shut the plant down to do them. And if that's not true in your world, for free I'll come in and I'll find them for you. Now, I'm not saying all your policies are bad, but for you to think that that's all you got to do is make sure you follow all of our policies, then we're living in different universes. A tugboat, real quickly, a tugboat captain. We were with this tugboat captain for 4 days in a 4-day class. We all knew him by the end of the 4 days, and with tears running down his eyes, he told us he has sold everything that he owns. I'm not sold, transferred everything that he owns, his bank accounts, his cars, his house, because he knows what's going to happen one day. One day he pulls a barge up and down the East Coast full of oil, and one day he's going to spill a barrel of oil over the side, by mistake, of course. And the Coast Guard's going to come and investigate it, and they're going to go into his pilot house, and they're going to find the bookcase that's in his pilot house, the bookcase ceiling to floor, filled with procedures. And they're going to find a procedure that he didn't follow, that if he would have followed, there would not have been an oil spill. And with tears running down his eyes, he said, there ain't no way I'd ever get a tugboat out of port if I had to follow every one of those procedures. And then with the tears running down his eyes, he said, the company's covered if something goes wrong. They'll just point to the procedure, but I'm not. Is there another question?
I'm looking down through the list. I don't see any other questions after that. If anybody else does have anything, feel free to go ahead and send it now. We'll wait a few seconds here and see if anybody has anything else.
You know, since there doesn't seem to be anything, again, I've been doing this since the 1970s, and root cause analysis was seen as a boring, tedious exercise that resulted in action items, new procedures, and reports. The people who are embracing this see it as an exciting, life-changing, transformational, culture-changing endeavor that people want to be involved with. Just imagine now, please remember this one thing, no blame. If something goes wrong, no blame, no blame. Required introspection. It's life-changing. Thank you very much, Norval. I really appreciate it, and everybody else.
Thank you, Bob. We appreciate your time today and giving this great webinar. It has been recorded, and we will have it posted here in the next day or two. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Please join us December the 1st for our next webinar. And until then, hope everybody has a good Thanksgiving. Take care.
You too.
Bye now.
Bye.